Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Three with the SME conversation focused on how you can quantify your technology ROI. Today, we're talking with a MercuryGate subject matter expert in our MercuryGate smart transportation platform. We're going to be finding out how our prospects and customers can understand the return on investment that our solutions can bring. We're here today to give you a quick understanding of this important topic, as well as some real-world applications. My name is Michael Willard, and before we get started, there's a few quick housekeeping notes I want to share. This session's being recorded, and we're making it available to you on demand so you can stop, start, and rewind at your convenience. Please take a moment to see the related content that we provided in the On24 presentation panel. You can download these deliverables to take a deeper dive to this topic at your convenience. Our subject matter expert invites you to submit your questions. Just click the contact details under our presenter profiles in the On24 webinar viewer. That'll send an email directly to our presenter today. Also, be sure to follow us on LinkedIn. You can be on the lookout there for future events when you connect with us on LinkedIn using that link that you see in the related content that we provided in the On24 viewer. With that out of the way, let's introduce today's subject matter expert. Kyle Moore is a senior solutions consultant for MercuryGate International. He's been part of our team for 8 years, working first as an account executive before moving into the solutions consulting area about 6 years ago. He's a transportation technology enthusiast, and we're certainly excited to have him join us today. Again, I'm Michael Willard, a marketing strategist for MercuryGate and the host of our Three with the SME conversation series. So, Kyle, I want to get started with the most basic part of our conversation today. What is an ROI session, and why did we create it for the marketplace?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Well, obviously, ROI is one of those buzz acronyms that we often hear during sales and buying cycles, and it obviously means a return on investment, and that's really what this session is at MercuryGate. It's a session designed to help prospective customers dollar returns on their investment with the MercuryGate solution. Here at MercuryGate, we view this as a very collaborative engagement, right? And so what I mean by that is this process, it's designed to help buying teams, really tailor the output of the ROI specific to their business, right? So what I mean by that is at MercuryGate, we deal with all sorts of different business types. We're working with shippers, we're working with freight forwarders, we're working with freight brokers, carriers, 3PLs, and ultimately these organizations have different needs in different areas where they're going to drive value from our solutions. And so what we've put together is a session that will tailor these results very differently to the organizations that we're speaking to. And in order to do that, this has to be, a joint venture between the MercuryGate sales team and the customer's buying team. So there's a lot of back and forth that goes on here. Kind of at a very high level, what the entire workshop is it starts with some information gathering. It's then has a very sophisticated calculator component to it, and then there's one or multiple meetings that happen where we discuss the findings and help to tailor those findings specific to the individual buyer. So why did we create this? Well, ultimately it was to help buyers truly understand where they can drive value from our solutions. We've seen that it's very easy for buying teams during a TMS buying cycle to get super bogged down into actual kind of functional requirements and clicks and very detailed technical requirements for the system. Well, the ROI session allows them to kind of step back one level and really understand and focus on where the solution is going to drive actual hard dollar savings for their organization.
Okay, so we've created a work session that helps people understand the return on investment that they can get from our solutions. So why are we talking about it now? How is that a conversation that's important on this part in time?
Yeah, sure. So, at MercuryGate, this is a super pertinent time to be talking about this. This is one of those times out of the year where we often see an uptick in new TMS buying cycles, right? And there's obviously a plethora of reasons as to why that is the case. There's all sorts of different things that drive organizations into a TMS evaluation process. But this time of year, driving folks is, starting to get a budget ready for next year. This is the fourth quarter. Folks are starting to think about how they're going to spend their money in 2025 and how they're going to justify that spend. And so a lot of the research and information gathering that goes into doing that for an enterprise level software is going to take, the fourth quarter. Also, this is the time of year where, supply chains start to see increased pressure due to peak season. And those increased pressures, they are often eye-opening as to where organizations can invest in better tools, in better processes, right? They don't often see those things at other times of year where, the flow of goods is not as extreme. When things start to build up, this is where they start to see those areas for improvement. And that's another reason why they start looking at a TMS. So two primary drivers that we see this time of year, but obviously there's a lot of reasons why folks start looking for a TMS, but this is a popular time of the year to start doing that.
That certainly makes a lot of sense. Nothing reveals sort of your inadequacies or your weaknesses like some supply chain pressure of the peak season. And of course, it makes perfect sense that a lot of folks are planning for their budget for the year ahead. They want to know the tools that they might need to tackle some of those challenges. Now, speaking of tools, Kyle, you mentioned in the early going there, the ROI calculator. What is that? How do we get it? And what does it provide?
Yeah, so the ROI calculator itself is really the pivotal piece to the ROI analysis. And, what it is functionally is it is a spreadsheet style tool that's filled with, a bunch of different functions and calculations where we take that initial input I talked about, it gets plugged in, and that's what drives the actual analysis. Now, this tool itself, it was developed completely independently of MercuryGate sales and marketing teams. We went out and we partnered with a third-party organization that specializes in understanding ROI for organizations like MercuryGate in putting together, a tool like the one that we now use. And, kind of their methodology or their process for going about that, again, is not to sit and ask MercuryGate sales and marketing where we think we drive value. It's really they work directly with our customers. And so they spent hours and hours worth of time interviewing MercuryGate's direct customers and really understanding, okay, what did those organizations look like prior to implementing a MercuryGate solution? And then, what was the actual impact once that solution was in place? And then how do we actually quantify that impact down to kind of a dollar value? Right, this, really nice spreadsheet tool that we have, and what it is it becomes a tool that is on one hand very simple to use, but also very powerful and very sophisticated in the results that it drives.
That's great information. And I want to let folks know that we have a self-service version of that ROI calculator at our website at MercuryGate.com. You can find it linked there and the related content as well. That's where you can go and input your values and find out the ROI on our TMS, our final mile, our claim solution, optimization, many of the solutions that we offer into the marketplace, all they're available in our self-service ROI calculator. So speaking of value that you get from that calculator and that it reveals, Kyle, let's talk about the value that people take from an ROI session. What will they get from that?
Yeah, so the true value here is that after a full ROI, workshop with the MercuryGate team, is that the buying team is able to develop a message about ROI that they are comfortable with. And ultimately, this becomes their message. So yes, they're using, our tools and our methodology to get there, but it's all based upon the input that they give us and the ownership that they take of the information. I mentioned that this tool is designed in such a way that it's really gets tailored to the individual buyer. And so what happens is now that buying team is able to articulate within their own organization why MercuryGate is a good fit for them. And ultimately, it arms them with the message that they need to internally justify their business case for a TMS project. And they don't have to rely on MercuryGate's sales team in order to articulate that message for them or with them, because this is now a message that they have developed and they have ownership of. And so there's a lot more value in an ROI when the buying team really leads that development rather than an ROI that's just being told to them by some sales director or pre-sales team.
Yeah, certainly buy-in as part of that buying team is important in a process like this. Now let's dive into the nuts and bolts of the ROI session itself. Take us through the process of the session from start to finish. How does it work, Kyle?
Yeah, so in general, I kind of break it down into a 4-step process, right? It begins with a questionnaire. So our sales directors will work directly with, prospective customer to gather a bunch of information about their organization, right? And these are the variables that are specific to their business, right? So again, these variables differ over what's specific to that individual client. After we've collected all that information, we have an internal MercuryGate review, right, where the entire sales team gets together. We take an initial pass of all the information collected on that questionnaire. We couple that with all of the other information we've collected through the various conversations we've had with folks over the engagement. And we do kind of a preliminary output of results, making sure that it all makes sense based upon the information we've gathered so far. With that in place, we then move into the third part of the workshop, which is really these workshop meetings. And it's always one meeting. Very often we have multiple of these meetings because of the good level of dialogue that ends up happening here. But the goal of these meetings is kind of twofold, right? It's one, to validate the inputs, right? We've gathered all this information and put it into the calculator. We want to make sure that we gathered the right information. And then two, to interrogate the outputs. Right? So this is the part where we really tailor that message specific to the individual client. So this calculator, designed to be broad in nature, there may be things that are valuable to one organization and not to another, and we have to eliminate those from an ROI analysis. Or there could be things specific to that organization that aren't captured by the broader calculator, and we want to add those areas in or adjust those areas to truly show the value that that organization is going to get. And so these collaborative workshop meetings, they are the heart of the ROI study. This is where the two teams come together to put all the information together and make sure we got it right. And so this naturally leads into kind of the fourth and final component of the workshop, which is a presentation of results, right? So after the two teams have gotten together and batted all this stuff around, it gets cleaned up into a final presentation.
Okay, you mentioned outputs, and I want to go back to that for a moment. What are those outputs, and then how am I positioned to utilize those? And we've got a slide that we can share with you that kind of give you a better idea of what those outputs include.
Yeah, sure. So that final output. Ultimately, what it is it's a very in-depth, multi-slide PowerPoint presentation around the specific benefits and value drivers that organization can see, right? So there's a lot of detail slides. It's inclusive of an executive summary, right? So this executive summary is a single slide that kind of pulls out some of the key findings that we have in there, including payback time in months. It breaks it down to a 5-year ROI. Trying to really understand the return on investment. Negative summary, we come with a bunch of backup data points as well, right? So we're talking about things like ROI calculated over a 3 or 5 year time frame. That's very configurable, specific to what the organization is looking for. We absolutely include in here the cost of not moving forward or the value forfeited from not going forward with a TMS today. And then, in short, ultimately this output becomes a tangible asset, right? That buying team can now leverage internally in conversations that they're having where the MercuryGate team is not involved.
Okay, and you can see this is an example that we've created from a mock company to kind of give everybody an understand. This is only a draft. This is for an example to show everybody what we've got there. So, as we look more into the benefits summary, maybe we can talk a little bit about who needs to be involved in participating in this ROI session. Who needs to be included in these conversations?
Yeah, great. And so as you can see on that last slide, that benefit summary, we really break this down to some very granular benefits specific to that organization. And so, the more buy-in we get from the broader project team that's involved in this ROI study, the more value that's going to be generated from it, right? So very often TMS evaluations teams, they have multiple stakeholders, multiple people that are involved. The more participation we get from these folks, the more information we get from the various pieces of the organization, this all goes into crafting a more effective message for that buying team. Okay. Now, that being said, it is entirely possible for us to start this process with gathering kind of little to no information from the client. So the tool has put together in such a way that we have a bunch of industry benchmarks and other pieces of information that we can use and compile an ROI study that's more generic in nature, right? And so this does not have to be a heavy lift to the buying team. We can start it pretty easily. And so, I realize that I gave you kind of two totally different answers to that question there, Michael. Just to kind of summarize it, very little lift in order to get this started. So who needs to be involved? Almost nobody, just a little bit of information. But how to make this very impactful is to get everybody on that buying team involved and in those workshop sessions where we're having those conversations.
That's an important distinction, I think, especially if we go back to the early part of the conversation where we talk about timing. If somebody's in the middle of their peak season stress and they're encountering problems, maybe they're not in a position to provide a lot of information. But as we move through the process, they bring more people in to get that buy-in. We can get more detail, provide more information all along the way. So again, just like you said, you can provide a little bit of information or a lot, and we're still going to be able to deliver some value there. So yeah, we talked about the best time to, or really more about the timing around why are we talking about this today. But if I'm out there and I'm considering a new solution, when is the best time in the buying process to get started with this ROI session?
Yeah, another great question there. And so I think, traditionally, the default in a TMS buying cycle is that the customer has already made a selection, has made kind of a down selection of finalists, and that's fine, that's great, but we certainly find that putting this workshop at the complete other end, at the very beginning of the process, drives a lot of value, right? And really how it does that is, I already mentioned at the beginning, it helps an organization truly realize the areas of most importance to them and where they're going to get value, right? There's very often times in these conversations where buying teams discover areas of value that they had not previously considered, right? And this ultimately helps them steer their entire evaluation process from there, being able to very succinctly realize the areas of their organization that will be most impacted and where they can drive the most value, then helps them keep focused throughout the entire evaluation process on those areas, and again, keeps them from getting buried in functional requirements and technical details, keeps them on focus as to where the organization will get value here. And then ultimately, a third thing that it does is it really gives them a playbook to hold all vendors accountable, and be able to measure them on the same criteria, right? So Not all TMS solutions out there are created equal. Having a really good understanding about where your organization needs to drive value from a system helps with that overall evaluation of individual vendors. So, taking that from the tail end of the process and flipping it to the beginning can have a major positive effect on that overall buying process.
Okay, so you can do it at the beginning or at the end, maybe late stages after you've already run the RFP, you've got some proposals. You can really compare those vendors and find the best for you, the best that's going to bring you the most ROI. So I want to take it down to the easy part. What's the easiest way for our prospects out there to get started with an ROI session?
Yeah, so I mean, the absolute easiest way, you mentioned it earlier, Michael, is we have a self-serve calculator right on our website. Right? So if folks just want to get kind of an understanding of what are some of the types of questions we ask, what's the information we gather, plug that in on their own and start to get an idea, that's the easiest place to get started. But I mentioned that this can be a very little lift project for the buying team. So if you're engaged in a current TMS project, please reach out to one of the MercuryGate sales directors, MercuryGate customer experience rep. This is the type of engagement that we find a lot of value in. We've seen that organizations who engage us also find that value. So however is easiest to get started for you, we're ready to engage.
And, we've talked a lot about this as sort of a starting point for maybe a prospect that's out there in the world, but our ROI sessions are available and helpful for our existing MercuryGate customers as well. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. Like I said, we've got all sorts of different organizations using various different solutions that we offer, and so we can help to drive value in different parts of their organization. Some folks may already have solutions in place and are considering adding complementary solutions and want to understand, what would be their return on investment for those complementary solutions. That's another great time to get started and engage our customer experience team.
And of course, for folks that are our existing customers, just reach out to your customer success agents to get started with that ROI session and take the next step towards driving more value from your MercuryGate platform. Kyle, you've delivered a ton of great information today, but before we conclude, I just want to put it back in your court one time and see if there's anything else that you want to add about our ROI workshop session and its role here at MercuryGate.
Yeah, I think kind of my final takeaway, Michael, is that, for whatever reason during sales cycles, I see people or teams that are, hesitant to engage in this. And whether it's because, they're not sure where they're going to drive the ROI and they're not, sure what the results are going to be, or they see this as some sort of, extra work that they hadn't anticipated to go along with their buying process. There's some hesitancy out there. But I can tell you that, the teams that we have engaged with, that kind of started with a little bit of hesitancy, once they get into the project, they start to really see and understand the value from it, and they end up spending a lot of time with us. And kind of one of the biggest takeaways that often folks get from this entire ROI analysis is one of those key KPIs that I mentioned earlier, and what's the cost of inaction, right? What does it actually cost the organization to not move forward and not improve their transportation processes today? That is a very tangible piece of information that we give on every single one of these ROI analysis tools. So it's worth it. It's worth the time. It's worth the investment. Our teams are excited about these type of engagements, and would really like to do these with anybody out there who's considering a new TMS purchase in the near future.
Kyle, thanks very much for introducing this topic to our audience and for sharing some of your time with us today.
Yeah, absolutely.
A quick reminder to our audience, you can connect with Kyle using the email link under his name and credentials in the On24 viewer. Also, as you can see on our screen, we provide regular transportation industry updates in our Knowledge Center. That's where you'll find the MercuryGate blog, and it's updated weekly with topics focused on helping you achieve smart transportation across your supply chain. Just find our Knowledge Center at MercuryGate.com, and you can access all the deliverables you see on the screen. Don't forget, follow MercuryGate International on LinkedIn. That's where you can get there by clicking that LinkedIn logo you see in the webinar viewer near the bottom of our list of related content. And of course, this is a great way to stay informed about the new content and events that we've got coming up, including future episodes of our 3 with the SME conversation series. We'll have another episode coming up very soon. Just visit the events page at mercurygate.com to find out and register for our next presentation. Until then, on behalf of Kyle Moore and everyone at MercuryGate International, thank you for joining us for today's conversation.